Nityanam Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Dayamudirayat Nashta Prayeshava Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktevavati Naishtaki. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Let me get my screen set up here. Canto 9, Chapter 9, Text 45. Devai kamavaro dato mahyam tribhuvaneshvarai navrine tamaham kamam bhuta bhavana bhavana. Devai kamavaro dato mahyam tribhuvaneshvarai navrine tamaham kamam bhuta bhavana bhavana. Devai, by the demigods, kamavara, the benediction to have whatever he wanted, data, was given, mahyam, unto me, tribhuvana ishvarai, by the demigods, the protectors of the three worlds, who can do whatever they like within this material world. Navrine, did not accept, tam, that, aham, I, kamam, everything desirable within this material world. Bhuta bhavana bhavana, being fully absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and therefore not interested in anything material. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is a verse being spoken by Katvanga Maharaj, right? It was Maharaj Katvanga. The demigods, the directors of the three worlds, wanted to give me whatever benediction I desired. I did not want their benedictions, however, because I am interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who created everything in this material world. I am more interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead than in all material benedictions. Purport. A devotee is always transcendentally situated. Param drishtva nivartate. One who has seen the Supreme Personality of Godhead is no longer interested in material sense enjoyment. Even such an exalted devotee as Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest for the sake of material benefit, but when he actually saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he refused to accept any material benediction. He said, Svamin kritartho smi varam nayache. My dear Lord, I am fully satisfied with whatever you have given me or not given me. I have nothing to ask from you, for I am fully satisfied to be engaged in your service. This is the mentality of a pure devotee who does not want anything material or spiritual from the personality of Godhead. Our Krishna consciousness movement is therefore called Krishna Bhavanamrita Sangha, the association of persons who are simply satisfied in thoughts of Krishna. Being absorbed in thoughts of Krishna is neither expensive nor troublesome. Krishna says, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Offer obeisances and worship me. Bhagavad Gita 9:34. Anyone can always think of Krishna without difficulties or obstacles. This is called Krishna Bhavanamrita. One who is absorbed in Krishna Bhavanamrita has no material benefits to ask from Krishna. Instead, such a person prays to the Lord for the benediction of being able to spread his glories all over the world. Mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatad bhaktir haik tuki twai. A Krishna conscious person does not even want to stop his cycle of birth and death. He simply prays, I may take birth as you like, but my only prayer is that I may be engaged in your service. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapara Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sa Tad that's it. What's the next one? Gorshan
Advaitam Savadutam
Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So nice to be with all of you today and to be hearing and speaking on the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a verse not spoken by Maharaj Khatvanga, but this is a verse actually thought by Maharaj Khatvanga. It makes a difference, I think, because he's not like trying to show off to anyone how materially detached he is. He's just stating, he's just thinking to himself, you know, I don't want anything of this material world. I just want to serve Krishna. So again, we'll just quickly read the verse. Maharaj Khatvanga thought, the demigods, the directors of the three worlds, wanted to give me whatever benediction I desired. I did not want their benedictions, however, because I am interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who created everything in this material world. I am more interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead than in all material benedictions. So this is a thought that Maharaj Khatvanga had when he realized, after serving the demigods by helping them fight a war, and the demigods offered him, apparently the demigods offered him whatever he wanted, and he was like, nah, I'm good. I'm happy just serving, as long as I can serve Krishna, then I'm good. I don't need anything from you. Demigods can give him anything he wants, practically within this material world. And he's like, nah, really, I'm good. And I just think it's so beautifully significant that this is just such a perfect example of pure devotional service. So I thought it would be interesting to cover a few different things. Let me pull up. In terms of this point of not wanting anything from Krishna. Like, how do we even get to that point? So in today's class, I thought we would cover, what does it actually mean to not want anything material? Like, what does it actually mean to be completely desireless of material things? And then the obvious next question is, why do we even still have material desires if we've been practicing bhakti yoga and worshiping Krishna? Why do some of us might still have material desires. And we realize, because in the beginning, we start chanting Hare Krishna, we start practicing Krishna consciousness, we realize how blissful it is, because, you know, Lord Chaitanya immediately reciprocates by giving us the great experience, intense experiences of the bliss of serving Krishna, and experiencing ourselves as a soul. And then we think, wow, this is great, I don't want anything else. And then you keep chanting, and then Krishna shows you, oh wait, no, you actually still have material desires in your heart that you have to continue chanting to purify. And then the next obvious question is when we realize, oh no, wait, I still have material desires. But I'm so inspired by personalities, but like Khatvanga Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj and even Dhruva Maharaj, who had material desires. But then as soon as he saw Krishna, they just completely vanished like that. Why doesn't that happen to me every time I walk into the temple and see the deities? Why do I still have material desires? So we're going to try to answer some of these questions. And then, of course, the question of, you know, what do we do with our material desires when we're wanting to become devotees of Krishna, pure devotees of Krishna? And then, of course, following the footsteps of Khatvanga Maharaj, how do we properly offer prayers for pure devotional service when our hearts aren't so pure? I thought we'd cover a few of these different topics today. And did anyone, I don't know if anyone picked out in this purport, I actually loved it so much how Srila Prabhupada, although it's a very heavy topic of pure devotional service, he was so encouraging in the purport. He was like trying to sell Krishna consciousness like a transcendental businessman. There was just a couple of lines that stuck out to me where I was just like, wow, Prabhupada, like he's just so encouraging, enthusiastic about really making Krishna consciousness so available to everyone. So a couple of these lines were, being absorbed in thoughts of Krishna is neither expensive nor troublesome. You know, like that's such a businessman, like for the low price of just being absorbed in Krishna. And that there's no trouble at all. You know, it's so easy. And he tries to makes it sound so easy and encouraging for us. And he says, anyone can always think of Krishna without difficulties or obstacles, you know? And I'm like, wow, I want to be anyone. So it's just so nice how Srila Prabhupada, he gives us the highest thing in the most encouraging way. Like, you can do this, guys. Don't worry about you can do this. You can be absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And he's just so lovingly encouraging to those of us that are like the most fallen, lost souls in this Kali Yuga. He's just really trying to give us the highest thing. It's so incredible, really, if you think about it. So we'll get to our first question here. Like, what does it actually mean to not want anything material? And the first thing that popped into my head when I asked myself this question was Lord Chaitanya's verse in the Shikshastakam, Nadanam Najanam Nasundrim Kavitam Na Bharisha Kamaye Mama Janmanishvar Bhavatad Bhaktir Haituki Twai. He says, I don't want any wealth. I don't want to enjoy the pleasures of the opposite sex. I don't want to enjoy having any followers and fame. I just want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth, like that. He just wants to be engaged in serving Krishna. And so Lord Chaitanya himself, it was Krishna himself coming to set an example of how a pure devotee acts, and how not just how a pure devotee acts, but how a pure devotee thinks and feels. And so these desires of not wanting anything but devotional service is just a perfect example of what it means to not want anything material. So material things are of course can be gross, like on the level of the senses. You know, we want chocolate ice cream, and we want fancy music, and we want, you know, to enjoy the opposite sex, and we want, or the same sex, you know, whatever, Kali Yuga, whatever it is that you want out of this material world. There's the gross desires, but then there's subtle desires, right? So many of us practicing devotees have overcome our gross desires to some extent or another. Some of us are still struggling very much with the gross desires. But then you might think, oh, those devotees that have overcome their gross desires, you know, that practicing the 4 regular principles, no big deal, so easy for them, you know. And for some of us, it may be difficult. For some of us, it may be very easy. But still, there's those subtle material desires that are still, they're not, you can't maybe touch them with your hands or experience them with your senses, but there's the subtle material desires of the false ego that want profit, adoration, distinction, you know. And that's just as dangerous, extraordinarily dangerous, especially if you're in some prestigious position within a spiritual society, to still have these desires that creep up and can contaminate one's devotional activities. It's very dangerous. So these material desires, they taint our devotional service. And it's so unfortunate, because we want to be able to offer pure devotional service to Krishna, and then these desires come up. So what do we do? One of the things that we can do is hear and chant about the glories of the pure devotees. And the more we glorify these pure devotees who are free from material desires, the more our hearts become inspired to want nothing other than Krishna, and to really see the lack of benefit of the things that one might get out of this material world, either on a gross or subtle level, and to want nothing but pure devotion to Krishna. So I was thinking, there's so many examples of devotees who are offering very similar prayers to Maharaj Khatvanga, where Krishna or a demigod come and offer them whatever they want, and they're like, nah, you know, I'm good. I just want pure devotional service. And there's so many stories I was thinking of we could tell, but because Srivas Thakur's, I think, is it Appearance Day or Disappearance Day coming? I think it's his Appearance Day coming up, but don't quote me on that. You can look on please see your local Vaishnav calendar to make sure whether it's an appearance. So that's coming up this weekend. And so I was thinking, oh, well, we could tell one of Srivas Thakur's examples, because he's such an exalted devotee of the Lord. And so there was once when an ecstatic, roaring kirtan was happening in the house of Srivas Thakur, as was very usual for Lord Chaitanya's Navadvip pastimes. They were dancing ecstatically all night. They just, like, it's not like they danced all night and then slept the whole next day. No, they just were just in transcendental ecstasy all night and all day, hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. So on one such night, Lord Chaitanya, in his usual way, was just floating in the mellows of devotional ecstasies, chanting and dancing with his associates. And all of a sudden, Lord Chaitanya, or not Lord Chaitanya, but Srivas Thakur heard some crying and wailing. So he went to immediately go see what's happening in my house. They're going to disturb the Sankirtan. They're going to disturb Lord Chaitanya's devotional ecstasies. And he went to see, and he saw in one of their inner, private rooms in the house, his own son had left this world, had died. And the women of the house and all of the close associates of Srivas Thakur's wife, Malini, were crying and wailing in separation from his young son had died. And Srivas Thakur, what was his reaction? He said, please be quiet. Don't disturb don't let your crying be so loud and disturb the mood of ecstasies of Lord Chaitanya. And you might think, wow, that's kind of hard-hearted. But no, this was the most soft-hearted thing, because Srivas Thakur was speaking with wisdom. he knew, and he explained to the women that were crying over Srivas, or over Srivas's son, that, don't you understand? He just left this world in the most absolutely ecstatic possible situation any living entity could leave this world. He was surrounded by like the loud chanting of not just any Vaishnavas, but Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself and his eternal associates, just in the next room, where he could hear very loudly the chanting of the holy names. And Shiva said, so anyone that hears, that leaves their body in this situation is going to go immediately directly back to Godhead. So what do you have to lament over? But it didn't pacify their hearts. But he begged them, please, I don't want to cause any disturbance or interruption to Lord Chaitanya's ecstasy. So please, try to quiet down and don't lament so much, because actually he has a most fortunate life. He spent his life living and serving Lord Chaitanya and his associates, and then he left this world hearing the loud chanting. I mean, who could ask for something so wonderful in any lifetime to have such an experience like that? Even for one moment, we would be so fortunate. And then Srivas went back to the kirtan and resumed his ecstatic dancing and chanting just to please Lord Chaitanya. But news travels fast. It leaked out. The devotees started hearing, but no one wanted to tell, because everyone was in the same mood of Srivas Thakur. No one wanted to tell Lord Chaitanya, because everyone understood, oh, this will disturb him. It'll make him stop the kirtan. And no one wanted to change Lord Chaitanya's ecstatic mood like that. So, but the devotees, they kept it within their hearts, and they were feeling great sorrow, because in the soft hearts of the devotees, they neither wanted to disturb Lord Chaitanya, but they also felt sadness that they were going to be separated from this exalted devotee, from Srivas's son. And so there was a sorrow within their hearts. And Lord Chaitanya, of course, he, as the Paramatma within the heart of every living entity, could felt, what is the sorrow happening within my devotee's heart? So he himself actually ended up stopping the kirtan a few hours later and was like, wait, what's going on? Why are your hearts feeling such sorrow? And Srivas Thakur, his reply was that, how can there be any sorrow within this world when your beautiful smiling face is in my house? There's no sorrow. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, really, what's going on? And so eventually some of the devotees, because, if Lord Chaitanya is asking something, you can only keep quiet for so long. So eventually some of the devotees explained to him what had happened. And immediately he went to the room where Srivas's son had left this world. And he saw that the women were still quite upset. And he kind of threw the devotees off, because he started speaking to the dead body of Srivas's son. Obviously the soul had already left this world and gone to the spiritual world. Srivas's son was long gone. He was already, of course, wherever Lord Chaitanya is in Navadvip Dham is the spiritual world, but he had left this spiritual world to go to like the other eternal spiritual world. And Lord Chaitanya actually started speaking to the dead body. He said, hey, what are you doing? Why did you leave this world? And Srivas's son actually came back to life. The body started speaking. And he said, in response, he said, well, my time in this material body was up. We're all only, according to our karmas, we're given a specific amount of time that we're meant to live in this body. And anyways, who is anyone's mother or father or son, So please let me just move on from this material body that is not meant to serve me anymore, and let me just go. to where I'm meant to be in my next body, which was the eternal spiritual realm. And then the body dropped again and fell limpless, and everyone was shocked. But hearing those words from the dead body of Srivasa's son, that finally actually gave some relief and understanding and sobriety to those very soft-hearted feminine devotees who were feeling separation from him intensely. And so then Srivas Thakur began offering prayer. Actually, before Srivas Thakur began offering prayers, Lord Chaitanya began glorifying Srivas. He looked at Srivas and he was like, Srivas, what kind of exalted devotee are you that, having gone through such an extraordinarily difficult situation, you still wanted to serve me and please me by not wanting to cause disturbance to the king. He understood immediately Srivas's heart. And then Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, began weeping and crying intensely, saying, Srivas, how can I ever give up your association? And he was actually referring to, although unknowingly to all the other devotees, that he would soon be taking sannyas. He knew he would be leaving soon. But so he was thinking in his heart, like, how will I ever be able to give up the association of such an exalted devotee like Srivas Thakur? And then and then Srivas replied, along with all of his brothers, I want, my dear Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like, I don't want anything of this world. A very similar prayer to Maharaj Khatvanga. And we hear the same prayer being said again and again and again throughout, especially throughout the Bhagavatam, but even more so in the pages of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat. The devotees, again, Lord Chaitanya tries again and again offering his devotees benedictions, and they're always like, I don't want anything. I just want to serve you. And so this is what Srivas Thakur's prayer was. He said, you can allow me to take birth in whatever body, but please never take away my service to your lotus feet. Please help me to always be absorbed in devotional service to you. And so these are the prayers of the pure devotees. And wow, it took me way longer to tell that pastime than I was expecting. It's just such a great pastime. Sorry. But okay, so we'll try to quickly get through some of these points of like what, so we covered this point of what does it mean to not want anything material. So hopefully we explained that through this pastime a bit of Srivas Thakur. But I also want to emphasize that, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, that it doesn't mean that you don't have material things or acquire material things, but it means that you understand that they're all meant for Krishna's pleasure and that you don't want to enjoy any of that for yourself. So that's what it means to not want anything material. It doesn't mean that you don't want to earn a bunch of money to serve Radha Muralidhar nicely. That's okay. There's no problem with that. Like Srila Prabhupada, there was one time when I think he was talking to some extreme renunciate Mayavadi or something about why or whether one should or shouldn't acquire so many things. And Prabhupada was telling his disciples, if you brought me a wheelbarrow filled with gold, I would dump it out and bring back the empty wheelbarrow and say, fill it up again. Because it would use every single cent in Krishna's service. So not having material desires doesn't mean not having material things, but it means you don't want anything for yourself. You recognize everything belongs to Krishna. Let me just use whatever I'm given, whether it's Krishna's desire and my karmic reactions to have a lot or a little. Let me just use it all in Krishna's service. So that's what it means to not want anything material. Because again, someone can be very poor and be filled with unlimited desires to become rich and famous and blah, blah, blah. So, but when we start practicing Krishna consciousness, one of the after that, those first experiences of ecstasy, Krishna reveals to us the anarthas in our hearts, the unwanted things. That whether you, from a previous lifetime you still have desire for money or fame or beauty or even renunciation. It's something that's actually a material desire that devotees get caught in, thinking that it's a spiritual desire, the desire to be extraordinarily renounced, so whatever it is, we by Krishna's mercy, he shows us, wait, you still got some things in there that you got to purify. What do we do with these material desires? Well, and briefly, Srila Prabhupada encourages us to, of course, come to the highest platform of pure devotional service. But if you're not there, he encourages us to dovetail, to use those in Krishna's service. Okay, so you have a desire to be famous. Go be famous for Krishna. Become famous, not just so that you can be famous, but use your fame and to spread the glories of Lord Chaitanya and Krishna and the holy names everywhere. So so maybe you're good at making money, and you like acquiring money. Go and Radha Muralidhar, I would love to offer them some pure gold jewelry and like pure gold crowns and nice pure gold paraphernalia. Come, and we would love outfits made for Radha Muralidhar out of the finest silks and gemstones and gold and silver. Please come, donate your money to Radha Muralidhar and to spreading the glories of the holy name. It's not just to the deities. We've got a lot. There's so many people out there that need and want and are like thirsty to hear about Krishna consciousness. We could use in our temples and in the Bhakti Center, more and more facilities, more professional instruments to use online and in person to make the sound vibration of Krishna's holy names and Krishna's pastimes be presented in a more professional and attractive way, so that more and more people will come and want to hear about Krishna. So whatever it is that you desire, use it in Krishna's service, and in that way our desires become purified. And don't only try to use because if you just try to use your material desires in Krishna service without engaging in the 9 processes of devotional service, you might think to yourself, oh, look, I'm using so much in Krishna service, but really maybe I still actually want to enjoy it for myself a little bit. So that's why it's important to simultaneously engage our activities and dovetail our activities in Krishna's service, and at the same time hear and chant very seriously and very sincerely to purify those desires. And again, like I said, by hearing about the glorious activities, by hearing about the thoughts and the desires of pure devotees, we become influenced to also desire the same things, nothing but pure devotional service. And so these are some of the things that the Shastra and Srila Prabhupada have suggested to us to do with our material desires. And it's interesting because in this purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that the devotee doesn't want anything material or spiritual. So what does he mean by that? Because he says in one line, he says a devotee doesn't want anything in material or spiritual. But then at the very end of this purport, it's paradoxical that he mentions that the devotee doesn't mind taking birth in this material world because the devotee only wants to spread the glories of the holy name to everyone. So it seems he says the devotee doesn't even have any spiritual desires, but then at the end of the purport in the same paragraph he says the devotee wants to spread the holy names of the Lord all over the world. So it seems like a contradiction, but it's not a contradiction. Because when Prabhupada says that a devotee doesn't want anything, any spiritual desires, he's referring to that he doesn't want any of the 5 types of liberation. He doesn't care whether he's liberated or not. He doesn't care whether he stays in this material world. He doesn't care whether he has a body in the spiritual realm or in the material world. He's saying that the devotee only wants devotional service. So there's a difference between, it's important to differentiate between selfish spiritual desires and selfless spiritual desires. So it's a spiritual desire to be liberated, but at the same time, it's slightly selfish if your desire for liberation is coming from a place of, well, I don't want to have to suffer in this material world anymore. I just want to serve Krishna so that I don't have to suffer, versus I just want to serve Krishna because I just want to serve Krishna, because I want to please Krishna. So it's a very subtle thing, but there's pure spiritual desires, and then there's tainted spiritual desires. So here Prabhupada is referring to that the devotee doesn't even want these desires for liberation in terms of those types of spiritual desires. And the devotee just wants to keep serving Krishna in any way, shape, or form, no matter what happens. Please just give me devotional service. That is the desire of the pure devotee. In conclusion, I was thinking, how is it then, if we find within our hearts that we might still have material desires, how is it that we can pray purely? And how is it that we can come to the point of offering prayers purely without material desires, even when our hearts in our current situation may be impure? And it's important that, like, Radha Swami always encourages us that, especially if you ever get a chance to go on yatra, which who knows if that'll ever happen again, Hare Krishna, but he would always encourage us to pray for pure devotional service again and again. He'd say, every deity that you go before, every holy place you go and visit, every time you stand before the deity, pray, my dear Lord, please give me pure devotional service. He was encouraging this so much. But the problem is, he's also explained in lectures that the problem is that our lips might say one thing, but the Krishna is the Paramatma in our hearts, and he knows what we really want. So we may be standing before the deity and saying, Krishna, please give me pure devotional service. But my heart's really thinking, Krishna, I really want a nice wife or a husband or a fancy house or a good job or to be rid of my health problems or whatever, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what do we do then? That's when we should express our hearts honestly to Krishna. Krishna, I'm so sorry. I want so many things, but please help me to only want pure devotional service. That's a prayer. That's an honest prayer. Where we might say, Krishna, I have these desires for this or that or the other, but please do with it what you want. And Prabhupada would also encourage devotees to go before Lord Balaram if they had any difficulties. These are quoting Prabhupada almost exactly. He told the devotees, if you have any issue, go before Lord Balaram and say, my dear sir, this is the difficulty. And then explain the difficulty, and then let Balaram do what he wants with it. So in that way, he's saying, if you have a material difficulty or a material desire or whatever, you can express it to Krishna. But if you ask him to fulfill it, that is certainly not pure devotional service. And that won't help you that much to really approach. I mean, at least you're approaching Krishna. At least you know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. That's great. That's a huge step in the right direction. But it's not stepping towards pure devotional service. But a step towards pure devotional service is to say, okay, I have these desires, but please, I'm trusting you. You know what's actually best for me. Whether you want to fulfill it, or whether you want to remove it from my heart, or whether you want to purify me by making me actually just sincerely call out your holy names in desperation, seeing the reality of the fallen situation that I'm in, still having material desires when I'm trying to engage in pure devotional service. That when we approach Krishna in these moods, then it helps us to approach Krishna in pure devotional service. Where one day we actually sincerely can come before Krishna and say, Krishna, I really don't want anything but to serve you purely. So it's important that we're honest with Krishna, because if we lie to Krishna, that's not going to help us have pure devotional service. But at the same time, we should pray to Krishna and only one pure devotional service. So it helps us also to have this awareness like Khatvanga Maharaj had, with wisdom, that, Krishna is the eternal master of everything of this world, and he's the supreme enjoyer of everything in this world. So then what should I want for myself? But for us to come to that realization is only by the mercy of Krishna and his pure devotees. And by hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. So I'll stop there. We have 2 minutes for questions, corrections, chastisements, words of wisdom.
Hi, Krishna. Thank you, Tulsi Rani, for a dynamic discussion from your heart. Always inspiring to keep Krishna service in center and diminishing our material desires. Thank you very much for this wonderful lesson. I can only imagine how the flavor would be if Prabhuji also was along with you. We will make sure next time that he also can join you. Adi Pushpa, you wanted to say something?
Well, there's a lot of really wonderful devotees in this movement, and she's talking about the highest platform and getting there. And one of the things, like you see something in somebody like Radhanath Swami, is the humility. For example, the gopis, they were in such an exalted position. You can hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
They were in the greatest, and then as soon as they thought, you know what, we're the best devotees, Krishna left them. Just like that. As soon as I think I'm better than anybody, as soon as I think I'm better than anybody, even if we want the highest thing, then Krishna leaves. And there's that one pastime where the martial arts teacher tells Duryodhana, go out and find someone who's greater than you. And he comes back after being out all day. I couldn't find anybody greater than me. And then he says to Yudhishthira, go out and find somebody who's lower than you. And Yudhishthira Maharaj came back and said, I can't find anybody. I'm the least of all the devotees. So we want to be on the highest platform, and at the same time, you see all these other devotees and how wonderful they are, how Krishna is, but they're humble, and they're not thinking that they're great. Not to think that I'm better than anybody. It's an interesting trap of Maya. Just something to share. We've heard it so many times before, but it helps to hear these things.
Thank you so much, Adi Prabhu. So does my husband, do you have a question? Okay. He was trying to get my attention. I thought he was going to ask me a challenging question, but I guess not. Are there any other questions or comments?
Wonderful class. Really, really, really wonderful.
Well, I'll end the class by praying that Radha Murlidhar bring Gaura Sharan back to the Bhakti Center, if they so desire, very soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's another thing. You can also say, if you so desire. What were you going to say?
I also see, thank you very much for the prayer. I really appreciate it. I also see Athena's hand raised.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah. Athena, please.
Hare Krishna, Tulsi Rani Mataji, Dandavat Pranams. Such a lovely, lovely class. Thank you so much. I also second your last prayer. Hopefully, if so, Krishna desires bring Gashram back to Bhakti Center. It wouldn't be the same without him. I wanted to just appreciate your class so much. You spoke on a very, very elevated topic. And of course, one can't truly speak about it without having to have those realizations oneself. So I love how you spoke about even having no material desires, and then selfish spiritual desires, selfless spiritual desires. So and it really encourages all of us to truly ask ourselves that when we have these spiritual desires, that yes, are they truly pure? And again, Krishna is paramount in the heart. So thank you for just this wonderful discussion. I did have a question. It's interesting because, of course, we as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we are encouraged that the purest is we don't want liberation, because wanting liberation is also bhakti in the mode of goodness. And we just want pure devotional service. And the last line, even in this purport, mentions how we only want to be engaged in Krishna's service. That is the sincere prayer. But talking about liberation, I was just curious. There are 5 types of liberations: the Sayuja, which is the impersonal, and then liberation, living on the same planet as the Lord, looking like the Lord, having the same opulences, and then being an associate of the Lord. But when one, again, my understanding and how we've been trained, but the highest prayer is, dear sweet Lord, I don't even desire, say, to go back to Godhead. I just want to serve you anywhere you want me to, in hell, in heaven, on planet Earth. It could be in the spiritual world, but as long as I'm engaged in your devotional service. And that last line in the part reminds me of that. But say for those souls who are coming back lifetime and after lifetime to serve the Lord in hell, in this material world, what type of liberation is that, as they are not on the same planet, not looking like the Lord, not having the same opulences, and not impersonal? So it doesn't seem to fit any of the 5 types of liberation, yet they are, and they're serving the Lord and in the highest mood of service.
That's an excellent question. And I hear that yesterday was your birthday. So I'm going to take a quick moment to ask everyone here to pray sincerely that this birth that you have in this particular lifetime becomes absolutely perfect and filled with pure devotional service, and that you engage increasingly in hearing and chanting with great enthusiasm as you are now. So
thank you, Tulsi Rani. That's so sweet. It's such a sweet prayer. Thank you. Oh, I take it, and get all the blessings possible. Thank you so much. And prayer from such an exalted and sincere soul means so much. So thank you.
No, we pray that you perfect your human form of life in this lifetime, and if not, that you just go on increasing, hearing and chanting with great enthusiasm, because you're an excellent hearer and chanter. So it's a great question. I don't necessarily have I definitely don't have a perfect answer for that. But in one sense, Srila Prabhupada would say that, and actually Rupa Goswami would explain that that when a devotee is a pure devotee in this material world, that their body actually isn't material anymore. That it might look material, it might act material, like it might still feel, like when Srila Prabhupada was leaving his body, like the body that he was inhabiting was causing so many disturbances, but he wasn't disturbed by it. Even the doctors were saying, like, this man is got to be in like incredible amount of pain, because he was just skin and bones. There was like no meat, but Prabhupada would never express pain or difficulty, because his consciousness was completely out of out of the body. So the body might act material, but Rupa Goswami actually explains that it's an offense to consider the body of a pure devotee to be material. So in one sense, it's not like if someone's like running around the hellish planets chanting the glories of the holy of the Lord, you know, that if they're really on that platform, like, you know, for example, Narada Muni, he comes to the material world all the time, but he has a spiritual body. So in one sense, you could say that he does have Sarupya Mukti. Sarupya Mukti means having a body similar to that of the Lord, so in similar quality. But in one sense, you could say that, and that's really the best I can do to answer your question. It's like they're liberated in that way, and at the same time, another level of it is like that the pure devotee is explained to simultaneously be in this world and in the spiritual world, right? That, like, we say that in our morning prayers, that which one is it? How the spiritual master is always, you know, eternally serving the servants, the gopis, Nikunja, you know, Ratikeli Sidhya, like that, like he's always serving the servants of Srimati Radharani, and so he may be in the spirit, in the material world, but at the same time, their consciousness, you know, is actually in the spiritual world, like that. So they are liberated, completely liberated, but they may not be exhibiting the, you know, any of the 5 forms of liberation that you mentioned. So that's the best I can do to answer your question. Maybe Gorsharan has a better answer. Probably he has a better answer.
Thank you so much, Tulsi Rani. That was a wonderful answer. And I'd be curious if Garshan has anything to add to that. Thank you.
No. Okay. Thank you all for so sincerely coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class every day. And thank you for allowing me to be purified by glorifying the great devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Bhakti. Always Tulsi Rani Devi, please be there. Thank you all. See you tomorrow.
We'll see you soon, Gorsharan.